Okay, thank you very much for joining us, everyone, today. I hope I'm Sam, the marketing lead here at Summit, and I'm very pleased to be joined by John Crossan, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Culture Impact. We'll run for about 30 minutes or so, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. So please do pop them in the chat as we go, and we'll get to them all at the end. Now, over to you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Yeah, so Sam says I'm John Crossan. I work for a company called Culture Impact, and we are first and foremost a corporate culture consultancy. And what that means, what we spend most of our time doing, is working with people leaders, senior leaders, to help them think about how they manage culture in their organization, how they can assess and understand the culture they've got in their organization, and crucially, how they can help make sure that the culture they've got is actually fit for serving and delivering their strategy. So I'm going to spend a bit of time talking through a particular subject that we keep getting asked about lately. We've run a few of these different seminars with CIPD and now with Summit to help organizations with a particular question. And the question we keep getting asked is, why is it when we get really interesting, clear data in our engagement surveys, really interesting insights come out of these, how is it that some organizations can make fantastic change and the change sticks, and other organizations, they just don't seem to be able to get there? So they take the insights, they put things into practice, and they just don't get the results that they would expect. What's going on there? And what we've found is that some organizations are just jumping to action a little bit too quickly. They're looking at the data, they're thinking there's a clear insight there, let's act. But what they don't realize they're doing is they're often fixing the symptom. They're not really getting to the root cause and addressing that. Other organizations, they have really sophisticated processes, simple but sophisticated, for getting under the skin of that data. And if the engagement survey is really good at telling you what people are experiencing, they've developed a knack of thinking about why are they experiencing it and how are they experiencing it, day by day, interaction by interaction. So that's what we want to talk about for this session. But let me give you a few objectives. Here's what we're hoping you're going to come away with. First thing, high level, we want you to maximize your ability to make really informed responses to the insights you're getting from your engagement tools. Really informed, so you get the change that sticks as well. You don't exhaust yourself chasing symptoms. Part of the way we want to do that, we want to talk through the lens of culture. That's something we do a lot. And we want to help you understand what are the elements that actually generate culture and how is it that they are the experience of work. Within that, we want to demonstrate the power of mindsets, the hidden mindsets that people have got that are there in your organization, continually influencing how people are perceiving the things that leaders are doing, the statements and initiatives that you're putting out as an organization, and therefore how they're influencing behavior and results. We also, as an aside here, we want to explain how you can uncover them. And finally, we want to make sure you go away with something practical. So we're going to share a toolkit with you. You can get it via this QR code now, which we'll keep showing this at various points through the presentation, but a really practical toolkit. So the things that we're going to talk about through this session, you can start putting some of them into practice now. And next time you pull out your engagement reports, hopefully you'll be able to just move the needle on the kind of response you make and the kind of impact you get as a result. So, as a starting point, we want to think about this word culture. And you might want to put some comments into the chat here, which I can't see, sadly. I can see if I keep tabbing in and out of this. But I want to stay talking with you here. So, what does workplace culture mean to you? Maybe drop some comments into the chat or just bring that up, that question. And what we'll normally find is people will be saying things like, the way things are done around here. That's a really common response to this question. The way things are done, or the sum total of all the conversations going on in our organization at any one point in time. Now, these definitions, they're not really wrong, but they are quite limited. And what we've found is they can be quite disempowering for leaders, because when it's just the way things are done around here, it feels too big, it's too conceptual, it's too abstract. leaders struggle to get hold of that and think, well, what can I really do about it then? So culture gets relegated to a lower level of priority, or it's something that one team or one function, typically people, get to work with, rather than being understood as a strategic enabler that everyone should be paying attention to. So what we want to equip people with when we work with them around culture and how it links with engagement is a different way of understanding culture. It's not just what you say it is. It's not just the values that are on the wall or the values that are on the website. Culture for us is the patterns of behavior that are encouraged, discouraged, or tolerated by people and by systems over time. And this is a really powerful thing when people start to grasp this, when senior teams start to understand culture in this way, they start to suddenly sit up and take notice in a new way. They start to feel quite empowered because they realize that it's their patterns of behavior as leaders that cast the longest shadow or that have the biggest impact. And what this definition also does is it tells you everything you need to know as a leader to be able to manage culture. So when you think of the behaviors that you're encouraging around you, deliberately or accidentally, what are they? And are they actually the kind of behaviors that are going to build the kind of culture that you want? What gets discouraged? And again, we're not necessarily talking about explicit punishments here, but what kind of behaviors or perspectives or points of view are people discouraged from holding because they may be sidelined in some way or something's frowned upon? It's got a really major impact on what people are likely to do more of or less of, and therefore on the culture you have and the results you get. And what things are tolerated? What are we turning a blind eye to that actually we should really stop and we should put our foot down on and say, no, this is not the way our organization acts. This isn't in line with our values or our behaviors. And the piece around systems, people and systems over time as well, we'll come to this shortly, but it's not just behavior. People often talk about leadership behaviors being the primary driver of culture. It arguably is, but systems and processes are also very important for reinforcing and enabling people to behave the way you want them to behave. They can sometimes need upcycling. So if you understand culture this way, and if you can help your senior teams understand culture this way, then what starts to happen is they say, one, it's practical. It's not an abstract concept. It doesn't come out of the floors. It is practical. And secondly, crucially, it can be managed. But one other thing that you're dealing with here, this is a very, very human phenomenon. You're dealing with perceptions, people's perceptions. And as leaders in organizations, you're always influencing culture because people are always watching. But they're watching and they're interpreting through their own filters, through their own mindsets. And what we mean by that is we all carry our baggage, we all carry our experiences, what leaders have done in the past, how they've behaved in this organization or in others, what redundancies mean, what operating model changes mean. We carry this with us and we tend to superimpose the past on the present. And this is very important to understand because when you're managing culture and you get that, you start to see that actually you might be starting from a bit of an uphill battle to begin with. You have to manage perception and you have to manage people's mindsets. And why this is so important is because whatever results you're getting, bottom line, they are a result of the mindsets, the attitudes, the beliefs, this internal, invisible world that each of us comes to work with that influences our behavior, it influences our relationships, and influences the results that we get as an outcome of that. So we want to help you think about how do you get to the level of understanding the mindsets that people hold in your organization, the beliefs, the attitudes, and untested assumptions that are driving people's behavior throughout your organization. So I'm going to play with this a little bit for a few minutes just to give you an impact of the power of mindsets in organizations, in any aspects of your life, really. So first off, what are they? They're like filters, like a pair of glasses that we put on and color the way we see the world. And we've all got mindsets. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not good. They're not bad. You can think of them as shortcuts in our thinking, ways we've learned to think that help us move through what could be very lengthy processes of thought and meaning making. And that's useful in organizations when we've got to do things quickly until it's not. we start to get to a point where the mindsets we hold individually can get in the way of our growth and our performance and our potential. But the mindsets that we hold collectively in organizations can really limit our potential, our performance, and being able to deliver the right kind of culture that's going to deliver our strategy. Let me give you a few rules or a few principles of mindsets, and we're going to see how this works. A little bit of a game, a very simple level of perception, visual perception shortly. So rule number one, we create what we see. This is a really systemic way of thinking about things, but we are constantly making our own version of reality from what we see. And the same data, principle two, can give rise to more than one reality. I can see the same debates, the same argument one way, and another person can see it completely differently. And that's not just false memory, that's actually how we are perceiving and the meaning we're making of things. The third thing, we see what we expect to see, or what we want to see actually. We see what we want to see sometimes. And again, this is really powerful for leaders to understand when they think about the way we communicate, the messages we give, our behavior. People will be interpreting, and we sometimes have to really dial up our ability to show this is what we mean, this is what I'm trying to communicate through this. And then we've got to back it up with walking our talk. And the fourth principle of mindsets here, we hold on to what we know, whether that's good or bad. It can be quite difficult for new data to come in and for us to perceive it really as it is, new. We tend to hold on to past experiences and interpret the present through that. So when managing culture, this is all the kind of stuff that we've got to manage, the kind of stuff we have to accept and bear in mind. And this is why when managing culture, it shouldn't just be delegated to one function. One of the best partners you can have as a people leader managing culture is a really, really good comms team, for example. Working in sync, you can really get some traction. So let's see how this works. Very simple level here, guys, of visual perception. So we're simplifying it down, but we're going to see how powerful it is. Everyone's seen this. I've yet to find a person on the planet that hasn't seen this, this particular optical illusion. So the old lady, the young lady, these days I can't not see a giant bird's head on the top of the young lady's hair. But what rules, what principles of mindsets are at play here? We're creating what we see. The same data is giving rise to more than one reality for different people. And while you may be able to see one image or the other, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, we might say, to see one at the same time as the other. There's a moment at which our perception flicks from the old lady to the young lady, and then it might flip back again. Some people genuinely can't see one or the other image. But that moment of perception flicking, again, that's something that for us as leaders of culture, leaders of organizations, leaders of people, that moment of shifting perception that we want to try and get hold of. You could say that we're holding on to what we know, good or bad. If I'm used to seeing something, if I'm used to seeing the old lady, I might see that first, etc. But here we have a really good example of how the brain is creating a different story for one person than another. This one, fewer people have seen this. This seems to be a bit more rare, very, very powerful for me, because what this does is shows you very clearly how where there was no sense, there was no meaning to be made, all of a sudden meaning can be made and you can't then forget it. You can't unsee something that happened. I'd like to be asking the question, if there are any comments coming in, what do people see here? If you want to chuck anything into the chat, please do. But keep an eye on the screen for the next 5 seconds. Unless Sam or anyone wants to jump in with anything that anyone putting in the chat. Keep an eye on the screen for the next 5 seconds. You will see something that for most of you isn't there now, but will always be there forevermore. This is showing, if you now cannot unsee the guy on the horse, is that with a very simple input, the brain can be trained to make meaning of something, to join the dots, that really, they're probably not there to be joined. And while this is a little bit gimmicky, I find this really powerful because this is going on all the time in our organizations. In a more complex level, the way we are meeting people, the way I'm interpreting a sideways glance, a frustrated comment, a person impatiently walking in or out of the office, a closed door, an ignored email, or a clumsy comment. The way I'm interpreting these all the time is through the filters of the past. My brain is joining dots that perhaps aren't there to be joined. And if you are a leader leading culture, and therefore impact and engagement, you better understand this. So, what do we need to do? One, we need to create the conditions for new mindsets to thrive. And secondly, we need to manage the signals that reinforce the old mindsets. So be very careful of thinking, what are they and how do we manage them? I'm going to change step now, and I want to come to some real life organizational data, not an individual organization's engagement survey, but research conducted by the CIPD. A lot of you may be familiar with the Good Work Index. And this research was concluded this year, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. But there's a particular theme. I want to focus on one theme that came out of it, which is around mental and physical health, because I imagine that some of you could be seeing patterns around this in your engagement data. You might want to get under the skin of, because it's particularly, it's close to my heart as a subject. And I think if we work on nothing else, if we work on making sure that our people feel their work is serving them beneficially, mentally and physically, then we could be doing a lot worse things than that. So what came out of this research, 25% of people who responded, forget the sample size, but it's well in the thousands, hundreds of organizations, thousands of respondents. 25% think that their work has a negative impact on their mental health, with a similar percentage thinking their work has a negative impact on their physical health. Now, assuming they're exactly the same 25 people, I think we've got something like 34 million working people in the UK. That's 8.5 million people who think that their work, their experience is that their work is undermining their health in some way. If they're different, if those groups aren't completely overlapped, which they're probably not, almost certainly not, could be looking over 10, 12 million people. And that's a really staggering number for me. And with good reason, when I've spoken with a lot of people, leaders who've had similar data coming out of their engagement surveys, there's obviously an impatience and urgency to want to act. They want to do something with it. Now, the danger with going to action too early is that the engagement data they've got, that's telling them what people are experiencing. But as I said earlier, it's not really telling them how they're experiencing that, why they're experiencing that. We know from the Good Work Index data, and again, this is probably a fair assumption that this will be present in a lot of organizations, the factors correlating, and this isn't causality, it's correlation. Excessive workload, excessive pressure, people being exhausted, they're probably all interlinked. Poor relationships with colleagues and with line managers, and also poor perceptions of line managers. So these are factors correlating with the poor mental and physical health that we find in the Good Work Index. But again, even that's not telling you, well, what's underneath that? Because on this call, there could be 2 or 3 people with the same lights on your engagement dashboard lighting up, but for completely different reasons. You know, it might be that, what's driving the pressure exhaustion in one company could be very different to what's driving it from the next. So what we would say is get beneath the surface, look past these symptoms and try to get to the root cause. And here's where we want to share something that we find is a very powerful way of understanding that. There are 3 channels that drive culture in any organization. And when you understand these, you can start to get extremely practical and extremely specific about what you need to do to move from where you are now to a different place. The first channel is behaviors. So these are a really powerful channel. Most people understand that behavior, particularly leadership behavior, contributes to culture, builds culture. So if you want to build a culture of high performance and high accountability, then you want to make sure that you are asking for clear commitments, that you're following up on them. You're not settling for poor performance or accepting excuses. You've got to be willing to name it when it happens. If you're not going to have high accountability, you're not going to have high performance. It's very unlikely that you will. You've got to be careful of the excuses that you accept. If you want a culture where there's openness and learning, then as leaders, you need to be role modeling curiosity, learning, having retrospectives, being open to feedback, being open to being wrong, actually, which isn't every leader's strong suit. You certainly don't want to be clamping down on people, really punishing people when they make mistakes, explicitly or not. So different behavior is going to produce different cultures. The second channel, and I mentioned these briefly earlier, but the systems and processes that exist in your organization, they will guide and encourage, reinforce, or get in the way of the behaviors that you want, and therefore the culture that you want. So the systems and processes you've got, they may have made sense for an organization that you were in the past, or perhaps they were just put in place because it seemed like the right thing to do. There might not have been too much thought behind it. But are they the right ones now? And I mean, if I give you an example of, imagine an organization that wants to be really focused on delivering customer value, customer satisfaction. The customer is at the heart of every decision and everything we do. But there might be some kind of bonus or compensation system that means that at the end of the month, despite all the good customer-centric work sales teams have done prior to that, in the last week of the month, they're incentivized in a way that they start pushing anything through. And then the customer success team has to pick up the pieces. Or organizations that want to get really better at managing and enhancing performance, we often find they've got really bad management data around performance levels. So it's really difficult to do. And one that I learned of a little while ago, an organization where this particular lady worked that was really keen to create a culture of health and well-being in the organization. But also at the same time, for very well-meaning reasons, I imagine, they had a bonus of £200, I think it was, if you had 100% attendance through the year. So they're incentivizing people to come in when they're unwell, when they're feeling at a low ebb and should probably be resting or recovering. So you can see how systems and processes need thought as well, so that we can engineer the right kind of culture we want. And then the last channel, the third channel that we want you to start thinking about is symbols. So symbols are decisions we make, they're choices we make about where we spend our money, how we spend our money, what gets cut, or where we spend our time, or I don't know, who gets the big office in the corner, who gets the best parking spaces. All these different things that signify to people, this is what really matters. This is what we really value or what we really care about. So you've got to be very careful when there's a time to make a decision, organizationally or at leadership level or a key decision. You've got to make that decision based on something. And what that something is going to tell people what you care about the most. And you can undo a huge amount of work culturally and in terms of engagement through one clumsy symbol, through one hire that demonstrates that actually we care about delivery at any cost more than people, or something that demonstrates that we care about, I don't know, bottom line more than fairness. Doesn't mean to say these symbols are wrong or that the decision is wrong, but you need to be mindful of the impact. Other things, I was with a client just a little while ago, actually, earlier today, a really beautiful symbol. This organization is a financial company that's growing fast and scaling, really entrepreneurial spirit. And every month, 2 of the partners will spend time with up to 20 people from the organization, having a dinner, having some drinks, and being really open to learning, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not? And they've been very careful. As they grow and scale and things get a bit busier and more bureaucratic, they recognize they mustn't lose that, because that would send a very powerful symbol that they don't want to be sending. So 3 channels that drive culture that we need to think about. So how do you get under the skin of them? Well, you'd be doing a lot of this stuff anyway. I would imagine you'll be spending time when you get your engagement data, backing it up with interviews with key people. Perhaps you're spending time in focus groups, discovery groups. And this is exactly the right thing to do. It's exactly what we do. What we find is that people just stop a little bit short of where they need to go. They don't quite get under the skin of these behavior symbols and systems. The data's just lacking a little bit. So we encourage you to ask questions about what is getting rewarded or what's getting punished. And that's your encouragement and discouragement part of their culture statement. What are we tolerating? What are we turning a blind eye to that we really have to start coming down on and cutting out, and why? How are leaders balancing different priorities? So it might be, if we look at the well-being example from the Good Work Index, any organization needs to deliver performance. Any organization needs its people to be well. And these shouldn't be competing priorities, but the reality is they often end up being competing. So how do leaders balance that? What are the practices? What are the decisions? What are they doing? And if there's a choice between one thing or another, really, what is it that determines that decision? So you want to generate a level of openness in your focus groups or in your investigations that helps people to really open up about these things and start. This will give you the data, the how and the why behind the what of your engagement surveys. And where we're going here, we're going back to mindsets. Because what you'll start to hear things that people are believing to be true. People are assuming these shortcuts in thinking in key areas of business, in different functions. Finance might believe that operations are like this, or leaders at a certain level might feel like the leaders are above them, believe a certain thing, act a certain way. These assumptions, generalizations that are going on and that are driving perception, they're driving behavior, they're driving relationships, and they're driving results. And they're all out of sight. But if you ask the right questions in those focus groups and interviews, whatever it is you're doing, you will start to hear them. You've got to train your ear to listen a certain way, but you'll start to hear them. And what you'll find is that once you get to the mindsets, you can start to think about how you change them. And when you get that critical mass, believing and thinking a different way, that's when all the efforts you put into changing behavior, symbols, and systems, any leadership development, people development, all the different things you're trying to do around your comms, you'll find it starts to get even more traction. It becomes even more powerful. Now, what we would encourage you to end up with is what we call a from to, a description of the behaviors, symbols, and systems that you've heard through your investigations that you need to move away from, and what are the ones you want to move towards. So if we're looking at, these are just stock ideas, the kind of things we would typically expect to hear in many organizations where those mental health and physical health things are, this is the kind of stuff you might expect. So you'll often find leaders are role modeling the wrong thing by working very, very long hours. And whether they know they're doing it or not, they're creating an expectation that others do the same. If a leader does it like this, then I should do it myself. That's what it takes to belong around here. Or people saying yes to everything. Even when the bandwidth is limited, they're just saying yes. What's driving that? What are the mindsets driving this? You might find symbolically people are getting praised for going above and beyond. Tech companies, often you find this, there's the hero coder, the hero developer who does an all-night now and again, and he gets this hero status, but others want to be the same. That you're encouraging the wrong behavior there. Doesn't mean we don't have to do these things now and again, but there's a point at which you should say enough. Or at the systems level, I used to work in a construction organization, and we used to see continually, every time a new project was launched, the timelines baked in were always so optimistic. I don't know how we got to that, but it always spiked with huge amounts of labor thrown at the project right at the end. So behaviors and symbols and systems that we want to move from. And then what are the more optimal versions that we might want to move to? So you define this through your process, and we'll talk a little bit about how. But I just want to draw your attention to the words in italics at the top here. Find there are not just individual mindsets, but there might be one primary organizational mindset that's driving the whole thing. And this one on the left, well, both of them actually, we did hear in an organization we worked with where they were experiencing really, all of a sudden, a spike in attrition in their talent and more senior managers, and they couldn't understand why. And it took quite a bit of research, but when we found it, we could see what was happening. And they had a huge number of high performance, high potential people, more than you'd find in a lot of organizations. It's a really brilliant organization with brilliant people. But they'd not noticed when they were getting to that threshold of this is too much, and people were either checking out or burning out. But what was also going on, there was a hidden mindset that we heard at the leadership level and amongst this talented group, these all-stars, some of them, that high performance requires personal sacrifice. But the darker side of that we also heard was, if you can't hack it, you're just not right for the organization. And that had been perhaps true to a point, but it stopped being true because the expectations were so high, it was no longer healthy. And they went through a very, very rich process of reflection and looking in the mirror. And we're talking about the most senior levels here. And they really committed to a new organizational mindset, which was that sustainable high performance requires self-care and balance and looking after one another. So this is the last thing I want to share here, but I encourage you, if you want to really influence engagement through influencing culture, then don't do it alone. You need to have a real alliance, a partnership to drive it with you. And that's got to start at the exec, helping them feel really empowered that culture is an enabler of strategy and you can manage it. There are small things you can do, there are quick wins, but we've got to be conscious of the signals we're sending. Bringing the whole organization, this has to bring a whole system perspective so that everyone is involved, everyone feels included. They can contribute to whatever degree they want, they can have their voice heard in this. And also find a group of champions. We talk about culture champions or culture ambassadors. These are people that could be at any level in the organization who are already role modeling the kind of values, the kind of behaviors that you want to exhibit. And get these people involved in a way where they can promote and encourage and challenge people to be the way you're saying as an organization you want to be. And depending on what you do with them, it can be a very rich developmental process for them. But they become the eyes and the ears of your executive on matters of culture. Real trusted advisors who can let the executive know, and this is what we're doing and this is how it's landing. And it's working here, but that is falling flat. We need to think about that differently. Real trusted advisors. And the exec gets an intelligence from them, by the way, that they just would not get in any other way, even from people teams. The from to we've spoken about. And the final bit is you've got a ops plan, you've got a strategic plan, you've got a sales plan, every other type of plan in your business. Have a culture plan. And then all the different initiatives, all the interventions you're running, all the investments you're making that should be contributing to culture, they get anchored in the one place. You can be confident that they're all pointing at the same thing, not cannibalizing, not detracting from, but amplifying and accelerating the impact of everything you're doing. And that is that's the end of what I wanted to share with you. So I think we're going to open it up to Q&A now. I'm going to try and come back to the screen so I can see you folks. Sam, Q&A?